Hi, my name is Jan Wilczek from WolfSound.com. Welcome to WolfTalk, a podcast about audio programming. In this podcast, you will learn how to build your career in programming or research related to audio, meet programmers and researchers from all around the world, and learn about the intricacies of sound. Hi everyone, and welcome to the 8th episode of the WolfTalk podcast. Today I have a very special guest for you. His name is Prashant Mishra. So as a little bit of a background, I met Prashant at the Audio Developers Conference 2022 in London, and we instantly connected. We decided that we need to do a podcast episode together, and I'm happy to announce that it actually worked out. All the people, places, and references that we mentioned with Prashant in this podcast episode can be found under thewolfsound.com/talk008. Once again, thewolfsound.com/talk008. And now, Prashant Mishra. Hi, Prashant. Thanks for agreeing on this interview. Could you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, hi Jen. Thanks for having me. I'm not very sure like how to introduce myself because, it gets tricky. I think I'd like to think myself as an audiophile, wherein I like to listen to sounds around me. I like to record sounds, create music, create sound design, and all that. Professionally, I've been working as an audio director for an edtech company based out of India, where one of my role was to handle all of the direction for audio with respect to videos, educational videos, and games, and all that. And one of the interesting collaboration was with Disney, where I was working on a lot of their IPs and creating sound design and everything for Disney's IP-based games. I'm also like a little bit of an audio geek in the sense that I am very much interested in what's happening in the audio tech domain, what new applications are coming in, what new plugins are getting released, what more we can do, basically, which is, I think, one of the reasons why I also got into making small applications of my own, which I was using in my previous organization as well. And that kind of led me into deciding, okay, let me just go ahead and do this a lot more. Which is what I'm doing right now. I'm building audio applications, and I'm figuring out ways that the whole process of audio can basically be improved, and it can be extended to all other aspects of production, like whether it is collaborating with writers, directors, producers, and making sure that the audio communities get that access in a way that is kind of still at the moment a bit like isolated, meaning the audio community prefers to work in like a small group, not interacting much with anybody else. So I'm just trying to figure out how we can like improve that, which is why I'm also involved a lot into training people with respect to sound design, game audio, interactive audio, and all that, where apart from just discussing about audio, one of the aim is to also give them visibility into what happens for the rest of the departments, like how do writers come together and write a story, and how can we make sure that we become a part of that process. So that's pretty much kind of sums up where I'm at the moment.
Yeah, that's like a very, very rich portfolio and very rich bio. I already have a ton of questions about it. Could we maybe go to the very beginning, like where did your interest in music start, and when did the technology enter this interest?
I think this goes back to my childhood, I'd say, because I remember like my father used to get a lot of cassettes. Anytime a new movie is released, a new album is released, within a month or so, or within a few weeks. At that time, the logistics were not that quick. So within a month, we used to have audio cassettes, and then we used to play, and we'll basically play the cassette on loop like for for days. You specifically like a song. I'll kind of in the tape deck, if you know, there used to be this kind of value that will show up, analog value, which you can remember. Okay, at this point of time, this is the song that plays, and you cannot actually skip songs. So I used to memorize those value, and I used to fast forward to that stamp and then play that. So in a way, like I was kind of a music buff, and at the same time, I knew how to like kind of tackle technology in my favor, if that makes any sense. And I remember in my childhood there was like this song by a famous composer in India whose name is A.R. Rahman, and he has composed this song called "O Hamdam Soniore." I'll send you the link of that song. It's and my father got the cassette, and he actually was traveling, and when he came back he had the cassette with him. And then I remember him waking me up at 5 a.m. in the morning and just playing that cassette. And the song actually comes on the B side of the cassette. There used to be that concept, right? A side, B side. And when you play that cassette, I think within 4 seconds the song starts. And when the song started, I completely woke up. I'm kind of sleepy, but the moment the song started, I was completely awake, and I loved it so much. So I think that's, if I try to remember, that's one of those specific point where I definitely got interested into the nitty gritties of music, like the concept of beats, the bass line, the instruments that are playing along with the voice. So that's where I think it all started. And then eventually, when I got into college, I was doing mechanical engineering, but I also had this weird fantasy that I want to have my own music band, because I have been like a huge Linkin Park fan and a Mike Shinoda fan, and I also wanted to have a band. So I started looking for people who I can collaborate with. I had like learned a little bit of keys in my childhood, so I knew I can bring that aspect. But for a band, you need more people, right? You need drummers, you need bass guitarists, and a lot of other things. So that's when I actually reached out to a few of my college seniors and asked like, how can I build that community? Like, how can I find people? And that's where one of my college senior actually introduced me to a dog called FL Studio, which is pretty famous right now, and has been like for like a long time. And that's when I realized, okay, I can actually just make my own music in my laptop. For sure, I need more people if I have to have a band and if you have to perform live. But if I don't have access to those people at the moment, I don't have to actually wait. I have access to the drums, to the guitars, to the keys, and everything in the software. And that kind of fascinated me. So the college senior that I'm talking about, his name is Vishal Iyer, and he is a great drummer. He's a great keyboard player. And I think he is specifically the person who kind of introduced me into this world of audio technology. And since then, it has fascinated me a lot. And yeah, that's, I think, the introduction of me to audio tech. And before that, the A.R. Rahman song was kind of the nudge that pushed me into this music domain.
Yeah, and I can relate in that sense that when you use this stuff, then if you have a certain mindset, then you're starting to think, okay, like, but what's behind? Like, could I maybe make my own device, my own piece of software that does something similar? And when was this moment for you? Then you decided, okay, maybe I could create something that would even like boost my productivity.
Yeah, I think over the years, like as I use more and more DAWs, more plugins, I also kind of realized that there were few things that, all the applications are basically audio oriented, and there were very few at the moment that were production oriented, where things can be automated, right? If you want to do a bunch of things, is there a way that we can club them together? I was not aware of Keyboard Maestro and other automation tools at the moment, but I felt that, okay, there are ways where we can actually build something that will enable us to do that. At the same time, while I was exploring FL Studio, I came to know about this platform called DSP Robotics, which has an application called Flowstone, which is basically a node-based system where you can actually make your own synth. And I remember like trying it for the first time, and it's like kind of similar to Max in a way, not as versatile, but it allowed me to have like a basic UI and like have some functionalities, arpeggiator and oscillators and everything. And I remember I made my first like synth plugin with that. And I was fascinated, and I still remember like creating some bell sounds in that, and I made a melody with that, and it was much more what do you say, fulfilling, in the sense that I'm not just making my own music, but I'm using my own software to make my own music. And then I thought, okay, this is just a feeling that I'm getting because I have access to this plugin, right? If I actually send this to my friends or some people outside, and then in the future they will probably use this to make their own music, and then in a way I would have helped them in their creative process. And so I think it felt more or less like, instead of you being say the artist, you are making the tools like the pencils, different shades of pencils for the artist that they'll eventually use to make something, right? And that fascinated me even more, because I was like, okay, I can actually design something that is much more useful for someone, and in the future they'll make something that was based out of something that I created. So yeah, I mean the whole chain actually like was super fun, and that concept I think has stuck with me since then. And I think this is where I started exploring more into building audio tools and building some kind of automation tools. Yeah, so I think, yeah, for sure, I think that would be a moment.
So it's actually awesome because like this software is now a legacy, right? That like continues on through generations, ideally. But I also think it's a great way to explain someone what is audio programming actually, because people outside of our industry, they sometimes ask what I'm doing, and I'm saying that I'm a programmer in the field of sound processing. So I process sound with software, and they're like, "Oh, you work in a studio and you're a sound engineer, right?" I say, no, actually, I'm a person who creates tools for sound engineers. And I think that's exactly the way that you described. And drawing on this, like, when was the first moment that you, after graduation, that you entered, the audio industry? Maybe not necessarily as a programmer in this field, but when was your job eventually related to audio?
Yeah, I think so. Like I said, during college is when I started exploring different DAWs. So I was actually making a lot of music at that time, a lot of sound design at that time, but it was not like a paid gig. It was more like I make something, either upload it on SoundCloud or I just send it to my friends. And I actually used to time it with like friends' birthdays. So if somebody's birthday is coming up, I'll just make a track and gift it to them. So I used to do all of that. But
Nice.
professionally, I actually moved into this domain in 2015, which is like not so long ago. And that's where I started working as a sound designer in the start. Like, not even as sound designer, my main focus in the starting was cleaning up the voice, making sure that the voice is balanced and it doesn't have noise and all of that, the basic stuff. And eventually I learned and explored sound design, followed by music composition, followed by mixing, mastering, and all of that. I wouldn't say mastering. Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people just use mixing and mastering together, but it's a whole different concept. So I got into mixing. And then I started, because I was also hiring more people in the team I was building, I was able to actually get into direction, because then I'll be able to work with a group of sound designers and music composers and mix engineers and guide them into what a specific story needed. And that's where I think my journey has been. So, yeah.
Awesome. And so there you went into this also kind of management role, right?
Yeah.
So when you're orchestrating, right, that cooperation, or maybe I should ask something different. So for people who are like completely new to this, how would you shortly define maybe sound design? What is sound design?
Yeah, I think yeah, I mean that's a very philosophical question.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry, but in the way, like, let's imagine that we would need to explain it to somebody.
Okay, so if it is for someone who does not know about the audio domain at all, uh, sound design is a way where we add life to the picture that we see on the screen, which is, for example, if there's an image on the screen which is just an image, there's no animation, there's no visuals, and say it's of a mountain, right? It's a scene of a mountain where there is a river under it and something like that. If you look at that image, you can imagine a lot of things. uh, it can probably take you to a memory in your childhood where you actually visited a similar place or something like that, or it could be anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the moment you add a sound to it, like for example, an ambient sound of a river sound of subtle river flowing, a little bit of wind, or maybe a few bird sounds or something like that, that is when you actually get immersed in that picture. That is when you know that you are exactly in the place that's existing in the scene that you're watching. Until then, you could imagine any sound. That until then, you could be anywhere in the world. But with the sound, we can actually convey that this specific scene that you're watching is of this country without you even realizing. So I think this is what sound design is. You basically add life to the picture. You try to communicate a story in a subconscious way, which is slightly beyond what the visual is communicating to the users, to the viewers, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I keep saying users these days. So
Understand.
that's how I would define like sound design in like a short term. But anyone who basically wants to get into this domain professionally and want to learn, sound design is basically a process where you decide what a specific scene or a game or a podcast or a story requires, and then you create the ambiences or the effects required for it. It could be through recording your own sounds, placing it, and then kind of tweaking it just to make sure it sounds the right texture and everything which is required for the story. Or it could be just using some sound libraries, or it could be using some synthesizers to make your own sound effects and then using them in the context. So yeah, I mean, professionally, that's the process is that, but philosophically and approach wise, yeah, it's all about adding life to the visuals.
Yes, it's beautiful. So would you say that it's like sound design is something that should reinforce, that should support other senses through which we perceive certain things? So then, like I'd say that most popular applications are movies, right?
Mhm.
Video games, and probably some art installations, right? As are there and as you said, like all the podcast, audiobooks, and etc. Are there any like very important application areas that are missed that I missed from this list?
Uh, I think, yeah, I mean, this covers more or less everything. I mean, even if you consider VR and metaverse and all of that, it also comes in the visual side of things. But I think sound effects also plays a major role when it comes to conveying a specific message in the real world. For example,
Mm-hmm.
the sound of the ambulance, the sound of the sirens, even those are designed specifically to make sure that they sound like something is going wrong. uh, they will always give you a feel, okay, something is not right. Even the sound that we see like listen in the hospitals, right, for the heartbeat and something like that. So there are multiple other applications that you can think of, and this is also actually an area that's booming for anyone who want to research. Medical domain is actually kind of figuring out how they can use sound to, for example, make sure that their ambience in the hospital is slightly calm, especially for patients who might get triggered with loud noises and everything. So yeah, that could also be like one of the application area of sound design.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's like so practical and so useful, and I think it's simply beautiful. So to just maybe then clarify, because I heard this term, and I'm not a sound designer. I'm not in this field, so that's a newbie question. In the sense that, what is the difference between technical sound design and non-technical sound design? So that's a term that I've heard recently, and I would like to know, like, what's the precise difference between the two?
Okay, yeah, I think that's a good question. I think a lot of people are slightly confused about it. And there is actually an overlap between sound design and like the non technical sound design and the technical sound design. I mean, there's nothing non-technical anyway. You're using plugins, but yeah, like from a job perspective and like from a work perspective, I think we should compare this slightly with the visual media. Okay? In the sense that, so if you're aware of video applications like After Effects or any animation tool,
Hmm.
where an animator would basically create something and then render it as a video.
Hmm.
The video is then played back for the users, the viewers, and anybody else. That's kind of one way of doing it, right? When it comes to games, for example, the animations could be implemented in a different format where the VFX, like if there is a animation of a gunshot or maybe a
Hmm.
bomb blast or even a confetti like exploding, those might be approached in a different way, wherein you would be using some kind of game engine like Unity or Unreal, and then you will be like adding some kind of animation there, and it actually plays in real time in the game. So I think that's where I think the job is also like kind of differentiated between animator and then I think it's called technical artist, something like that. So similar concept applies even for games. So what happens is if you are a sound designer who is creating sounds and then uh, exporting it and implementing it in any of the game engines,
Hmm.
the usual approach. But there are also areas where you would actually use a different aspect of creating sounds, and that is like something called procedural audio. Like that's one of the examples where you will use tools like Meta Sounds or something like Game Synth by Sugi Studio, and you'll basically create notes or you'll basically write some commands either in the programming language or using some kind of node based system in which the sounds will basically be created with that code that is generated and not per se with an exported audio file that's just getting played back. And I think that is where the technical sound design aspect of the game actually comes up, and it has its own advantage. So, for example, if you use audio files, the game size could actually increase a lot, which is where these kind of procedural audio techniques kind of work, and tools like Meta Sounds also work because in that case you just have a code which is like a very short version, like it's like maybe 1 KB. That's also like I'm telling a long version, or maybe like within a few KBs. But
Hmm.
because it's based on code, the sounds will be generated in real time during gameplay. So yeah, I mean there are pros and cons. Like for example, how realistic can you make a sound using those techniques is always like a challenge. So there are always a pros and cons of it, but I would say like this is like overall like on a higher level, the difference between the technical sound designer and a sound design. I guess.
What I understood is that basically the moment that the sound designer starts introducing some logic to how the sound plays, and this logic can be in the form of a graphical system, as you said, node base, connecting nodes, writing instructions in a programming language, or working more intensively with the game engine and the code that runs the game. That's the kind of boundary that actually technical sound design starts. And can we go back to your career for a second now? So when you started working in sound design and then you started orchestrating, as you said, the cooperation of musicians and sound designers, then what exactly, you already mentioned it a little bit about this communication problem, like, but what were the challenges there and how did you overcome them?
Okay. Yeah, I mean that's a good question. I'll actually just clarify on one part which we discussed about
Hmm.
technical sound design. So actually, any sound designer would be using a logic when they're designing sounds for the game and
Okay.
have the whole criteria in their mind or documented that this is the situation where this sound effect will play, and if at all something else happened, then this sound will overpower it.
Okay.
Voicing would basically change and all of that. So logic is I think there in both the approaches, but technical
Okay.
sound design is more of slightly a little bit of coding oriented, slightly
Okay.
more towards the game engine side versus staying in the audio domain. So yeah, I think just to
Okay. Thanks. Thanks.
And so I think when it comes to like organizational part of my career, I think managing people and tasks is a different skill set as compared to creative work. And I mean, for sure, leadership and management is also has like some creativity involved, but it's a different type of creativity. Actually has nothing to do with your understanding of sound design, for example. So if so basically my role was actually in the beginnings kind of was overlapped between both the aspects, wherein I was managing a team of few people, but at the same time I was also making creative decisions. And in that case, my approach always has been, how do we figure out a workflow? How do we figure out a pipeline and process that is as streamlined as possible and as scalable as possible? If at the moment there are, say, 5 members in the team, and we are working on a few set of like number of videos or number of games per week or per month, and we have like a few targets in mind, what can be the process that will allow us to scale this up? Like I think a lot of people who start out working as a solo sound designers, they'll understand this better, because what happens is when you're working solo, right, your project session, the way you name something, it's all in your control. You make decisions. You are basically CEO of your own process, right? The moment you bring in just one more person, and I'm not talking about 5 more people, just one more person, the entire concept changes. You now have to be aligned with the way that other person feels comfortable. Is this the folder structure that they prefer? Is this how they would want to do their specific task? Is this the time of the day when they get ideas? Is like, are they more creative before lunch or after lunch? So it actually boils down to that nitty gritty, right? And which is where I think the management side of things actually kicks in, where you have to smartly plan what works out. How do we make sure that any kind of blockers are taken care of? How do we make sure that for the project that you have at hand, the team is trained and has the right skill? And if they don't, how do you plan the training sessions? How do you make sure that everybody is always enthusiastic to learn more, and all of and all of this actually also is in parallel to their personal issues, the family side of issues, or they might be having just a bad day, for example. So I think the management side of work that I had done was more about that domain, where while I'm also keeping a track of the creative process and making sure that all the standards are maintained quality wise, I also have to understand everybody's point of view. And I think that was a great experience, because it kind of makes the whole process a little more human, where you actually understand that yeah, everybody has their own problems. Everybody will have a good day and a bad day. Just because one person is doing an amazing sound design at a specific day and they did not do the same quality of work the next day, does not mean there is any kind of issue with their skill set. It's just that it did not click, and the next day it will. But you have a product to maintain. So how do you make sure that somebody else helps the other person out at that specific moment, and you figure something out? So yeah, I mean, if and I think in the game industry and in the professional industries, where everything is kind of structured, this is actually a different role. You will notice that game studios have something called audio producers, who would actually not be doing sound design more or less, but they be extremely well oriented with all the departments in the team. They'll be in regular touch with the sound designers, the producers, the other producers, understanding the requirement, understanding the timeline when they have to like deliver something. So it's a different skill set. And I think this is something that also people are not aware of. Everybody who wants to get into the game domain or any audio domain, they just think that okay, we just sound design is the only entry point, or music composition is the only entry point. It's not. If you think you are someone who is a skilled people's person, that you can always influence people in a good way, you can always like solve conflicts and all that, that's a major skill set that is actually looked after in any industry. It could be even a big audio company as well, where they might have a good set of say programmers, the coders, But then you always need a product manager and a project manager who can actually bring them all together.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, that was a fun thing for me, and I would actually encourage a lot of people who want to get into the audio industry to also consider that if it's their area of interest.
Cool. That's really amazing, and I believe it may be difficult also from my experience of working in different teams. That definitely requires a lot of compassion and a lot of thought to be aligned with everyone in the team.
Yeah.
And what I understand is it like that from there on did you get the chance to work with Disney actually? Okay, so could you maybe describe like the whole situation? How did it start, and like what was it like? What was it about?
Yeah. So I mean, without like while making sure that I'm not speaking anything that I'm not supposed to as part of NDA and all that. I was basically working and collaborating with the Disney Publishing Worldwide department of Disney, where my role was to have regular discussions with them and figure out how the games that we are building for their IPs can actually have the right kind of sound design that is Disney approved. And Disney approved in the sense that not from a uh, what is it called, the legal point of view, but rather storytelling point of view. So for example, if you are designing a sound design, like if you're making sounds for the IP cars,
Mm-hmm.
the sound should be so good and so relevant to that story that even if you play just one sound effect without context, and if you just ask anyone like which Disney movie that you think this belongs to, they should definitely say cars.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be an engine sound, by the way. It could be any sound. So one of my main area of work was to discuss with Disney and also kind of give them confidence that the sound design for these IPs can actually be done here in India, which was actually one of the fun challenge that I think I had, because generally what happens is any big brand is always very protective of their IPs, their content, and they're very particular about making sure that whatever is getting created for their brand and for their specific IPs that they have is very precise. And that's what
Mm-hmm.
they are where they are, right? Disney is Disney because they have so much attention to detail when it comes to storytelling. If it's a specific character, what sound does it have?
Mm-hmm.
Does it walk? What color tone does it prefer in its clothing and all that? So they are very much particular about it. And for them to just allow anybody in the world to just design sounds for their IP is not like an immediate thing, right? You have to prove that okay, you are actually on the same page as they are. You understand their guidelines. You are aware of the story as well as they are, right? So that was my main area in the beginning when I was assigned this specific project. And I think I took about a month or so working on IPs like Brave and Monster Inc., creating sound design for that, discussing with the person on Disney's end, uh, making sure that they know that I know what they're looking for. And once all of that worked out, once the team was actually happy with what was created, that's when my next role came in, where I basically scale this up. I do a little bit of knowledge transfer sessions with a bunch of people in the team so that they can also understand the approach, and then we can basically work on all of the games and videos that we were working on. So it was actually a fun project. I think it has been like a great learning experience because you get to understand the level of detail. I mean, the fact that the sound of Elsa's magic has a very specific sound. The fact that Olaf, the cloud that Olaf has on floating on above him, has a specific sound, and it is only for that specific cloud. You cannot use it anywhere else. It just is amazing. I mean, I would love if there is a game IP getting created, for example, or a new comic book that is getting written, or a new audio book or a podcast being written. I think this is one of the best approach, and it is exactly the concept of sonic branding, where if there is a sound for Intel, it is just for Intel. It will never be for anything else. And I loved that concept. it just blew me away. Like when I was exploring all of that. So yeah, that was basically like in brief how much I can reveal about my work with Disney.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And like after such an experience, like is it possible to like go even further? So like what was your next big step in the let's say audio space?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I have like a few over the years because I've been working and I've seen the thing is, like I said, if I am an audio buff, so I actually have explored almost every DAW. I know almost every plugin that exists in the world. And I think probably the first to use the plugins. And I think if you go to YouTube and you see any new, you'll probably see my comment there. And this for any product, right? And I actually take pride in this. And I think when I met a lot of people at Audio Developer Conference in London, where I met you as well, I was really happy to actually tell this to the developers that, okay, see, I know your plugins and I've been using it for a long time, and this has actually helped me in my work. And you should definitely see the shine on their face at that moment. I mean, I remember saying the same with Benjamin, the creator of Accentize, and I think I posted about it on LinkedIn as well. So yeah, I mean, that's one of the area of where I'm currently focusing on, making sure that the audio tech and the music tech industry grows as much as possible, making sure that more people are having access to it, so that there are more ideas coming into picture. So there are a lot of sound designers who have like great plugin ideas, great workflow ideas. So they are able to actually create something of their own, which I think you are also helping a lot with your YouTube channel. So
thank you.
I think I've been following your channel for a while now. Imagine like if there are more people who have an idea in their head and they're able to make a product out of it, whether it is for commercial purposes or just for their own specific work as an individual or as a studio or as a group of people, that will open up a lot of possibilities. And then somebody will create something in one part of the world, and then it will be extremely useful to somebody else in another part of the world. So that is, I think, an important area which I feel should be focused on. And I think the ADC community and everybody involved there, and the WolfSound, and I think the audio programmer, everyone is doing their bit to make sure that it becomes easy.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm very much focused on is making sure that there is a little more awareness about audio when it comes to India. Because even in my journey, when I had to decide that I want to switch to the audio industry after doing a mechanical engineering, was kind of a shock to my family and friends. And till date, I keep getting asked this question: if you had to go into audio, why did you do mechanical engineering and all that? It's just that people don't know how much of the Fourier transform concepts actually gets applied in the audio industry. How much of mechanical engineering is the math that we study there is actually immediately implemented in the whole concept of waves and oscillations and everything. That is something that people are not aware of. So I just want to make sure that there is awareness of the audio industry in general. There is a little more access to the game audio domain, which is still picking up in India, but is still not there. So, and the audio tech and music tech for sure. Because there are a lot of good developers in India, and there are a lot of good musicians in India. There are a lot of good musicians in India who have done a degree in computer science. And there are a lot of developers in India who are interested in music. And both of these kind of people are immediately the kind of people who should basically make something and explore the music tech domain, right? So yeah, that's one of my that's the second aim. One is basically to have make more people get into this domain of audio tech and everything, and improve awareness of the same in India. And I'm anyways I'm building audio products. I'm working with Soundly at the moment, and they are an amazing bunch of people, and we are kind of planning a lot of features, and I'm working on them. So yeah, it's a bunch of things on the way. So yeah, I'm not sure which one to pinpoint.
Yeah, that's true. You're very, very active in this area, and I really appreciate this as well, because it also helps to boost confidence in people who want to enter this industry. So there's one thing that I noticed from your profile is that you're also a certified WISE instructor. Is it correct? Yeah, so could you maybe tell a little bit about what is Wise and what you do in this domain?
Yeah, so basically, Wise is an middleware which basically allows an interface to the sound designers and music composers, which they're kind of familiar with, and makes them not to worry about the coding side of things. And
Okay.
so it is basically bridging the gap between the creative uh, people and the developers who would basically be integrating all of that into the actual game engine. Now, what happens a lot of times, and I think this is a myth or something that, or just an assumption that people have when it comes to game audio, that if you want to do game audio, if you want to get a job in game audio, you have to learn coding, which is not true. Within Unity, you can do a lot of things. Within Unreal Engine, you can do a lot of things without having to learn or do even a single line of code ever. All you need to understand is the basics of how to use Unity, where you'll just drag and drop sounds, create snapshots, have even the mixer values, even the sidechain, ducking, effects, reverb, everything is there. And I think Wise kind of expands those functionalities by providing even more features, like how do you set up a music loop, which basically transitions based on a specific criteria in the game while also staying in rhythm. So without like cross fading, for example. And things like how can you even make sure that all of the sounds that you have implemented in the game is in the budget, in the required size, and all of that. So there are a bunch of functionalities that Wise adds on. And it's not just Wise, actually, even Fmod and any middleware basically that exists. And a lot of people are also not aware that most of the big studios have their own tools, even though they would mention in the job description that you need to know Wise. The message that they want to convey is you need to have an understanding of audio implementation. But they just write Wise, and then people freak out. Oh, should I get like, no compulsory? No, obviously not. Like it's not like a degree, right? This audio domain actually is the one specific area where degree is not very relevant as long as you know what you're doing. And the same applies for game audio. So I think I became a Wise certified instructor primarily to make sure that I know how to teach Wise to somebody else. But that's about it. There's no other reasoning to, okay, I need to get a job and that's why I have a certification. It's not that criteria at all. Because I have been on the recruitment end for a long time now. And I can tell you a lot of people who just have like a sound engineering degree or something like that might sometimes know less than people actually have who have learned on their own. And this is the same even with certifications. So you can do any certifications in the world that you want. But if you are not actually working on your craft, if your portfolio is not good enough, it might not work out. So, yeah, I mean, Wise is a middleware. I mean, just to answer your question, I kind of got deviated. Similar to Fmod and similar to many others that exist. And it kind of adds on to the functionalities and makes it easier for the musicians and sound designers to focus on their craft and not worry about the coding side of things.
Awesome. So thanks a lot, and again, it's a really interesting thing. And like when you educate other people, like how do you do it? Like in what way do you have like one-on-one lessons, or do you have a group, or do you have like a course or something like this?
So as of now, actually, I'm doing a bunch of things. So I think you would have seen the sessions that we are doing with GameAudioLearning.com, where Greg Lester and I are basically taking sessions every month where we just talk about the functionalities of Wise step by step for beginners, and we are like simplifying it to the basic level so that everybody understands. And we are actually going to increase the frequency of that. I mean, we are going to do it a little more often, because what we realized is if you do it monthly, people kind of lose momentum, and that's what we don't want. So yeah, we want to encourage people to continue that. The other thing that I'm also doing is I'm taking some private sessions with a few people who I know of who want to get into the game audio domain. And for them, I have just set up like a daily 1.5 hours to 2 hours, something like that, where I teach the same thing that I'm teaching with the GameAudioLearning.com. But this is something which is very much inclined towards making sure that they are immediately eligible to make the switch to the game audio domain, because they are looking out for jobs. and they have like less time to do that. So
Yeah.
I'm just doing a little bit of private sessions, but all of that is all free. My aim, like I said, is to make sure that there are more people who are doing game audio stuff in India, because I think that's when the confidence of all the big companies would increase. There is an audio community existing even in India. You should always like turn your head there, like, right. So that's the aim. But yeah, I mean, these are the only two areas that I'm teaching at the moment.
Okay, cool. Thanks. And so I have a very specific question to you also in regard to education and starting out. So let's assume someone approached you and they wanted to become a technical sound designer. And I specifically mean a technical sound designer as a person who works also with code. So what would you say are the necessary skills that they need to have to get an entry-level job as a technical sound designer?
Yeah, so I think, that's a good question. The first and foremost, if somebody is getting into the technical sound designer, I would say, and if it is just for games, that's the domain you're mentioning, right? Okay, so first thing is they should have a good.
Yeah, let's assume that it's for games. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So the first thing would be for them to be passionate about games and have an understanding of game audio in general, because that's the prerequisite. You cannot code for any kind of sound design and anything if you don't understand game audio. So that's the first prerequisite. The second would be they need to have a good grasp of programming, at least in one language, preferably C++ or C sharp, because I think that's the one that's used in Unity. And I think also it would help them even transition into different language. But they should have an understanding of the basic concepts, whether it's object-oriented programming or just how the code actually works in RAM, how the CPU gets used, and all of that. The basic things should be something they should be aware of. And there are a bunch of good courses on Udemy, I think, which I'm happy to share the links with you if you want to like attach with your podcast.
Perfect, yeah.
I mean, just know at least one programming language. Again, you don't have to worry about learning everything because the concepts remain the same, just the syntax changes. So one programming language you need to be thorough with. And I think understand how do you design sounds using code. So a little bit of understanding of math is going to be helpful. So you should be comfortable in writing your own math functions or figuring out how to create math functions. So whether it's using graph tools or whether it is using MATLAB or anything that basically allows you to create sounds, that's another add-on. And the third thing and the last thing that I think is also like a major requirement is the ability to understand and create sounds using synths.
Okay.
Synthesizers have a lot of modules like oscillator, filters, and everything, and the same thing is going to get applied in the code. Exact same analogy, and just that it will be in code rather than a GUI, which you can also make a GUI for your own purposes and everything like that. But you need to have an understanding of how that works. And there are again tutorials and resources that can actually enable people to do that. I think there's an application called Syntorial by Audible Genius that's a brilliant tool to understand synthesis in general. It's not about programming, but it's about synthesis. And then you can use those exact same skills when you're writing code or when you're defining the functions and you're connecting nodes and everything like that. So yeah, these I think are the basics things that people should get comfortable with before they apply for a job in this domain.
Awesome. So let's recap. Like to get a entry level job in the technical sound design in the game industry, you need to have a passion for games. You need to have an understanding of how game engine works. Also with audio, you need to know at least one programming language, and you need to know how to create sounds with code. And the last thing was that you need to know also how to create sounds with synthesizers. So if you have like normal plugin or an analog synthesizer, you need to know how to handle it. Perfect. That's very concrete, and I think that will be very helpful to a lot of people who are also considering such a transition. And to maybe wrap this up, I have a last question to you, which is kind of a broader one. But would you be able to somehow summarize this year's Audio Developers Conference? So for anyone listening in the future, it was Audio Developers Conference 2022 in London. What was your impression after you came back to India?
Yeah, I think I am still in the hangover of the. To be frank, I'm also still jet lagged, so I'm also at the moment in the London time zone. My come back to India yet. But I think the Audio Developer Conference, I mean, not just this year, but throughout the years, has been one of the most important event in the audio industry, hands down. There's nothing else that comes even close. Uh, this year specifically, I think it was much more meaningful for me because I attended in person as compared to last year when it was just online. Even though online was also great, in person was just another experience. The fact that I actually got to meet a lot of creators of applications like Cyclings, Max, and Rainbow, David basically, and a lot more people from the industry, meeting Joshua in person, meeting you in person, meeting a lot of people who I have known for years through social media. I think that was a great experience. Secondly, all of the sessions that I attended, which I could because they were like in parallel at the same slot, but whichever I could attend, they were just brilliant. To see in real time, like how everybody has made plugins that work in real time using machine learning and they can source separate a song into different stems and it works immediately in your iPhone. It just was amazing. I mean, I am aware of all the research that's happening and all of the tools that are already available on the internet. But to see that in real time with some good examples and to also see that developers are way too open to share that information with everybody else without hiding anything, without worrying about any competition or something like that. They're just frankly telling, yeah, this is what we did, and accepting that this is the approach that they took where they failed, and this is the approach that actually worked out, and just making sure that it's known to everyone. I think was one of the most brilliant thing for me to like witness at the event, because a lot of people who are just starting out will probably do the same mistakes and they can actually learn from other people. The other thing I think from the event was the fact that nobody actually was carrying any of their designations with them. So whether I had to reach out to Bobby or Sophie or Derek from Pace or anyone or Andrew from Pace, for example, nobody actually had this kind of approach that, hey, I am like this huge person in this big company. How are you like talking so comfortably with me? Nobody had that kind of attitude at all. Everybody was so open to helping. So I think that was again something that I absolutely loved, and I think that's going to be one of the main reasons why I'll again attend the event next year, and to see a lot of students from different colleges and to get to know that there are a lot of them were also sponsored. There were a lot of diversity. There were a lot of people who were playing music, physically challenged people, contributing directly to the audio community, working with big companies to modify their tools so that they are also more accessible. To see all of that in real time and in front of my eyes was just brilliant. So, yeah, I mean, frankly speaking, Audio Developer Conference, I wish it was like more than 3 days, because on the third day I did not want to go back to my hotel. I just want to keep on like hanging out with everybody there. And yeah, I just wish I was there again.
Yeah, thank you so much, because I completely agree with all that you said. So it's a really beautiful summary, and I wholeheartedly agree. Prashant, thanks a lot for this interview. If someone listening to this wanted to reach out to you, where would you recommend they go?
Okay, so I am like pretty active on social media, like you would have seen. So anyone who would want to connect with me can join me on LinkedIn. I'll send the links to you, and you can.
Yes.
I'm also active on Twitter, and even though like everybody is ditching it, I'm still there. And you can always check out my website, which is prashantmishra.xyz, where you will have links to all of my social media and information about what I'm working on. And I also kind of sometimes mention projects where I need more people. So if anybody is interested, can also check the website. So yeah, I mean, LinkedIn and Twitter is I guess, the direct way for anyone to connect with me. And my website is where you can find information about what I'm doing right now.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks a lot. And I wish you all the best for all your future endeavors.
Thanks so much, Jan. I mean, just like a shout out to your YouTube channel, WolfSound, because frankly, I think I remember showing it to you on my phone that I'm already a subscriber. And the fact that you're doing and you're taking the time and you're teaching people and you're making sure that, I think you're on the same mission, right? Like lowering the bar, the entry level bar for everybody.
Exactly.
Work that you're doing. And I'm honored that you invited me for this call.
Likewise. And I'm honored that you agreed to have this talk with me. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right, everyone. That was Prashant Mishra. Thanks again to Prashant for this interview. I had a lot of fun doing it, and I hope we'll have a chance to meet again in person soon. Once again, all the people, places, and references mentioned in this podcast can be found at thewolfsound.com/talk008. And there you'll also find the possibility on how to contact Prashant if you want to ask him something directly. If you'd like to support this podcast, you can, of course, give a like on YouTube. You can subscribe on YouTube and maybe turn on notifications. But you can go to Apple Podcasts and leave a review there, of course, if you like the podcast. Finally, I would like to remind you that I have an audio plugin developer checklist for you, which you can find under thewolfsound.com/checklist. It lists all the bits and pieces of knowledge that you need to become an audio developer. Thanks for tuning in, and see you in the next one. Take care.